No complaining.
You know, a while ago, I made a video talking about Final Fantasy VII, and oh boy, did that make me cringe going back to it.
I've made my decision!
No! When did I make that video again? Jeez, 4 years ago? Wowza. And hey, it may have been a few years then, but we're finally getting that remake, and it only took about 2 decades. Final Fantasy VII has had a bit of a weird relationship with me and gamers, and for good reason. It's a game that changed gaming. A lot of the time, most RPGs were set in a fantasy setting, with you being the heroes going out to quest to save the world. Although I can be a bit pedantic, Final Fantasy VII really wasn't the first RPG to have a modern day setting. What I mean to say, it wasn't the first game to break away from the tradition of more fantasy. Really, in my opinion, I think that title goes to Persona. It came out a year earlier. Then again, they changed the Japanese kid into an African American kid for some reason. But enough about being culturally insensitive to Japanese. I think it's important to get to the actual topic of this video. Final Fantasy VII. Well, it wasn't the first RPG to break away from the previous traditions, it obviously was the most iconic. And for good reason. It was the marketing!
An evil empire is sucking the life force from the planet, destroying all that's in its path. It's up to one soldier of fortune to save the world.
But also, it was a fully 3D RPG, which, at the time, had beautiful graphics with pre-rendered backgrounds, and a story that managed to touch a lot of people's hearts, to the point where the game's influence still extends this very day. The game isn't perfect, but then again, what game is? Granted, I've seen some very stupid complaints about the game.
What a disappointment. We were expecting magic. The game is virtually what Windows is to DOS, a shell. You still have to use the pointing finger to select an enemy. Why can't they just cut to the darn battle without all the fancy junk? It's nice the first time, but for every tedious battle, come on.
Bet most of you weren't even alive when that video was around. But the game has some very interesting history and details about it. Originally, the game was slated to come out on the Super Nintendo as a 2D game, much like its predecessors, but got pushed to the N64 but simply wasn't powerful enough on cartridges. Or how the game was originally supposed to be a detective story with the main character's name being Joe and his partner Nicholas the Needle. No, I'm not kidding. But regardless, we got ourselves a game wedged itself in history, and one that'll probably be on the favorites list of old school gamers. And hopefully when the remake comes out next month, the same will be said for newer gamers. Granted, it probably won't have the same cultural impact that the original did, no matter how much long the commercials of the game are. Yeesh, 7 minutes long, huh? But the reason I wanted to make this video was to talk about an older topic I made a few years ago, back when the promise of the Final Fantasy remake was first made and Cloud actually looked more emo. And that's to talk about the importance of this scene.
You don't want me? I'm a virgin!
Prepare my chamber!
Considering the fact that up until you met Aerith, and yes, Aerith, that is her name, it was a translation error in the original, don't fight me on this. Up until you met her, there was a severe bleak undertone towards the entire game, especially when you consider that the segments where you attempt to save your friend Tifa from the Knight of Don Coronel's
Shimmy on over and give Daddy some sugar!
Mark Hamill? Is that you? Regardless, the part of the game where you go with Aerith around the sector getting clothes for Cloud to cross-dress, while having some darker undertones, is forgotten pretty quick due to how Aerith is willing to have fun with this, even making fun of Cloud and even sneaking a peek while he changes. And it's something I do hope that when the remake comes out that we actually have the journey of getting Cloud in a dress. From the promotional video though that came out earlier this year, I'm afraid we might not have that. Though in the fact that the mini games for the gym have also shown up there, I'm afraid we won't have that journey to put Cloud in a dress. And that just makes me sad. And I'm going to explain why. One of the more prominent moments of Final Fantasy VII is watching Aerith die. I know it's morbid for me to say, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to get someone complaining about spoilers, but this is a 20-year-old game.
Shut up!
Let's face it, it's probably the most iconic scene from the game, and the game does a good job of having the players care for the flower girl. And I think it would be a bit weaker impact if we didn't see the cross-dressing sequence going on. Because throughout this whole journey up to Girly Up Cloud, you spend a lot of time with Aerith, and you get to see more playful side to her. At best in the original game, we see more of a soft-spoken girl who has an air of mystery about her, and we learn that she used to have a boyfriend and Soldier. But it's the journey of hunting down women's clothes that really humanizes the character. We see a much more playful side to her. We see her deal with the oddly creepy men outside the strip club. We see her a bit more ooh la la when Cloud is trying on the clothes. It makes the character more fleshed out and in turn allows the players to grow more comfortable with her, as if she were real. People have multiple dimensions to them. They have layers to them. I swear to God, if you insert a Shrek joke here, I'm gonna go. It's really easy to look at a character in games and just say, oh, he's the snob, or she's the stupid idiot. But having those kinds of character traits are only surface level, and seeing more sides to a character in games allows the players to connect on a more personal level. And while this is true for other mediums, games have a much stronger use of this because throughout this, you're putting yourself in the place of Cloud. You're the one who's controlling him. So in a sense, you're the one who's going along with Aerith on this little escapade. And that leads into the second reason. Choice in video games is a real oddity. A lot of the time, choices can ultimately be useless in games. Players will want to make the right choice in games, choices that will lead them to the good ending. And oftentimes, choices will boil down to you being the paragon of good or the master of evil. Even in games where there are dialogue options, that doesn't really amount to much difference in interaction and can just be cringe-inducing.
Could you say that like Dr. Frankenstein? Igor, fetch me the brain! No.
There are only a few games where I can count the choices that actually matter. Lisa the Painful is one of the good ones right there, where the name of the game is Choices Affects the Gameplay. And hey, Final Fantasy VII isn't really all that different. In fact, the only choices you get as to how you want to build your characters with your materia, and the game doesn't even open that up until the later half. In fact, choices aren't really a factor in Final Fantasy VII, but depending on what you do in this sequence up to getting the awkward pervertiness, that will determine who gets chosen between Cloud, Aerith, and Tifa for Don Cornero. It's a bit of an interesting aspect to the game and one that offered a bit more choice. Does it affect the rest of the game? No. Not really. But back in the day, choices like that were really rare in games. I'd love to see it be more implemented in the remake. After all, wouldn't you want to do what you could to save the girls from having to deal with this guy?
Fuck me silly.
Much like with Aerith's development, this scene would greatly help Cloud out in his character. Most of the time, and especially when the character design of Cloud being revealed a long while ago, there were plenty of people who had the idealized Cloud Strife and how he was turned into an emo.
You guys remember that image of Cloud then and Cloud now? There's more we can delve into regarding it. Cloud in the original Final Fantasy was a good character. He wisecracked, took charge, and was admittedly kind of an ass. People who played Final Fantasy grew up with this image of Cloud. The Cloud who rides a chocobo through a plane. The Cloud who cross-dressed. The Cloud who, despite seeing some really horrible shit in military life and losing much of what he cared about, still managed to be a snarky jerk. Not some monotone emo who for some reason always finds the ground really captivating.
Unfortunately, that really wasn't Cloud. There's this little thing called context, and having played the game recently on Switch, Cloud was a dick. Especially in the early game, he didn't care about saving the planet. Hell, he barely cared about his childhood friend Tifa. He was even willing to walk out on her on the first Mako reactor was blown up. He wasn't much of a joker. He was a serious hard ass. He wasn't even in Soldier. His identity was a lie. There is a lighter side to Cloud in the game, but from when the game was shown off a few years ago, I remember people complaining about how Cloud was, well, for lack of a better word, a pansy. He was sickly, he was emo, he was really pale, and people did not like it. But if people actually paid attention to the story, Tifa found Cloud not long after Cloud and Zack, the actual soldier that helped Cloud, managed to reach Midgar, and Zack died to an ambush of soldier members. While the timetable isn't exactly known, and I'm not that uber of a fan to check, Cloud really wasn't all that there. In fact, I remember when the remakes were announced back in 2015, they actually made Cloud look a lot more haggard, and people complained about it, even though it made perfect sense. Granted, having played the demo, they pretty much removed that aspect, so So what does this have to do with the cross-dressing scene? Well, as anyone who's played the original game or even the demo will say, Cloud is being a cold dick. It's his interactions with Aerith that really breaks him out of that shell. And the cross-dressing scene really puts Cloud in a more uncomfortable parts. It challenges him, it takes him out of his comfort zone and breaks the tough guy cool persona that he had throughout the game to this point. Again, it allows the players to see a different side of Cloud and allows players to really connect with the guy. I mean, let's face it, if you're watching this video, you're probably not some skinny twig boy with glowing blue eyes who can lift a hunk of metal with one hand. We see Cloud being awkward. We see him being human. We see how uncomfortable it is for him to be hot tubbing with a ton of muscular guys of questionable sexuality. We see him doing squats in order to get a wig that's, stashed in a very weird place. Big roast fist cut to the bone! And we see that he's a person who's willing to humiliate himself in order to protect his friends, not letting his ego or false persona get in the way of trying to save Tifa. I really hope there's a quest line in the game where you can do all this. Getting Aerith's commentary as Cloud gets more and more embarrassed as the prospect of him getting closer and closer to becoming a woman. Well, that came out wrong. Final Fantasy VII is a game. At its core, it's a pretty dark game, with themes of death, loss, destruction of the environment, and many other themes. And frankly, while I do appreciate that, I also appreciate the more lighthearted moments of the game. Let's face it, the chances of seeing Biggs being punched by Barrett and flying to the camera in the remake are probably not going to happen. And when the other parts of the game come out, the chances of seeing Cloud being forced to ride a dolphin, him falling comically, or such will probably not be there. And to me, that'd be a shame if we didn't have that journey that leads us to the admittedly pretty looking cutscene that we saw in the promo. There are goofy moments from what I've seen, even in the demo, but it's still not enough to really entertain me. Not that the demo is bad, the presentation, the voice acting, the graphics, and the battle system made me dive right into playing it and actually got me interested in going into it. This sequence in the wall market, where it ends up with Cloud backing off from the girl he's trying to save, arms crossed and being all shy, it's important. And I'd like to reiterate what I said in my original video on the topic. And that's the point. It's life. You never know what's going to happen to you. When you first put the disc into your PlayStation and start playing the game, you expect a steampunk action adventure with a dark atmosphere. And while there are some softer moments before this, there wasn't anything this bizarrely entertaining. This scene represents that even in the darkest of times, you can still find time to laugh and enjoy yourself, even if the times are unfortunate and there are dark undertones. I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking this, but with the remake coming along really soon, I do hope that we at least get some entertaining points for this scene. Especially if they are fleshing out more and more of the game, like they have with the demo that I've seen. I have both hopes and reservations about this remake, but I do hope that the experience of it will be a pleasant one. But what are your guys' thoughts? Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you for your time, and let's get ready to return to Midgar.
Cloud, there's still so much to be done.